I can recall where I was asked to come in to provide like an audit. And the data team had identified a cohort of like new stressed parents who had recently searched for things like financial relief. The idea would be, ideally, you would then target this cohort with relevant like educational tools or something that can help support them. What ended up being prioritized was these predatory high interest loan ads.
When you look at who's converting best in your AI systems, not the aggregate numbers, but the actual people, what are you seeing? Are they making informed decisions, or are they searching for help at 2 a.m.?
So, the AI isn't finding a buyer. It's finding a person that is incapable of making a rational decision in that moment. So it's weaponizing the idea that they're vulnerable and they're more likely to convert because of this vulnerability.
Welcome to Humans of AI. I'm Laura Weaver.
This is Nicole Alexander, author of Ethical AI in Marketing, professor at NYU, and former global head of marketing at Meta. And she's asking the question most boardrooms aren't ready for: what if your AI is working exactly as designed, and that's the problem? That audit, that wasn't an isolated incident. It was Nicole's wake-up call to a pattern she'd been seeing for years.
My wake-up call wasn't necessarily like a sudden crisis that just happened and exploded. I think it was more of a persistent unease during a project that I worked on, and it focused on like optimizing ad delivery. The traditional playbook that we marketers go by, asks, does this ad work? And the AI-driven system asks a much harder question. Pretty much it says, what vulnerability is the most profitable lever to pull? And that's how many AI systems look at it, because it looks at things of efficiency and effectiveness. And it doesn't take into account metrics around responsibility, around ethics, around are these outcomes optimal for the user versus optimal for who's serving the ad?
That question, what vulnerability is the most profitable lever to pull? That's not rhetorical. That's how the math works when you optimize for conversion without constraints.
Our ethical guardrails were utterly unequipped for AI's like power to identify and unfortunately to exploit individual cognitive biases. So I think the key failure is the assumption that if something is efficient, it must be ethical. And that's just fundamentally untrue.
How many quarterly reviews have you sat through where efficiency was the only metric that mattered, where the team that increased conversion rates by 40% got the biggest bonus, and nobody asked how they did it?
It's not the system that did it, and it's not even necessarily a moral failure of the data scientists and the engineers behind it. It's the idea of what we say is a positive outcome without ethical guardrails and without understanding that you don't optimize for a specific outcome with nothing else holding true. Because the system doesn't know any better. So the system will just optimize any way it can, unless it's fine-tuned to say, if this, then this, et cetera, and put in those elements of ethical guardrails.
So here's the diagnostic. What outcome did you tell your AI to optimize for? Not what you hoped it would do, but what did you explicitly prompt it to maximize? Because if the answer is clicks, engagement, conversions, time spent, without equally weighted constraints around user well-being, then you've told your system to find the most efficient path to those metrics. And the most efficient path often runs straight through human invulnerability. So we know the problem. AI systems optimizing brilliantly for the wrong objective. Stressed parents, predatory loans, surgical precision, finding vulnerability. But how does this happen? How do smart people with good intentions end up building systems that exploit the people they're supposed to serve? Nicole's answer comes from working at scale.
For instance, my time at Meta, right, taught me a crucial distinction. The distinction is around growth is a physics problem, right? Responsibility is a human problem. The physics of growth is you scale algorithms and engagement. It's measurable, and you could argue it's relentless because you always strive for continued growth. The human problem of responsibility is fostering the well-being and mitigating harm. And this is complex, it's qualitative, and it often directly opposes those short-term physics goals.
In most organizations, those two problems live in different buildings. Growth reports to the CFO, responsibility reports to legal. They review what growth already built. And that structure guarantees the outcome Nicole found in that audit, because you can't retrofit ethics into a system that was optimized for something else.
So I think the lesson that most leaders need to absorb is that responsibility should be codified, right, into the physics of growth, not treated as like this post facto policy layer or this team that sits outside of where the action is happening. If your algorithms are engineered for time spent, they will inevitably reward outrage because outrage and anger is sticky. So I think the idea is that you must engineer them for kind of trust and long-term value first, and understand what building that relationship actually looks like.
Engineer for trust first, which means trust sits in the room when you design the growth algorithm, not after you deploy it. That's not how most companies are structured, which is why most companies end up in Nicole's situation, called in to audit a system that's working perfectly at the wrong objective. So that's the structural problem, growth and responsibility living in different buildings, solving different equations. But changing structures requires people willing to challenge them. People who look at how things work and ask, should they work that way? Where does that come from?
Building enterprise-grade AI shouldn't be complicated. It should just work the right way. At Writer.com, we don't do everything. We do one thing. We build enterprise AI that unites business and IT. Business teams, build your own AI agents. No code required. IT teams, manage just one platform, not a plethora of point solutions. Writer.com creates AI tools that are safe, scalable, and smarter every time you use them. That's why Accenture, Qualcomm, Vanguard, and hundreds more aren't just doing enterprise AI the right way. They're doing it the Writer way. Book your demo at writer.com/demo.
I was in high school and I was bored. This is bored. I would skip school all the time. When kids skip school, you think like, who are you hanging out with? And I would like go to the park and read. I remember when the principal called my mother and was like, hey, your kid's missing. And my mom came to me and said, why are you skipping school? And I'm like, it's not interesting. I feel like this isn't a good use of my time and I'd rather read books. And I remember she chuckled. My mom never chuckled a lot, but she said, well, have you ever thought about asking for more? If what you're getting doesn't serve you, then have you reached out to your teachers?
If what you're getting doesn't serve you, ask for more.
After she said that, it really got me to understand that don't settle for like the status quo. Challenge yourself by challenging others. And after I reached out to my science teacher at that point, I subsequently went into like more advanced classes that really like offered just a more diverse range of like subject matter. And it was amazing.
That principle shows up in everything Nicole's built. The ethical framework she teaches at NYU and Columbia. She created those because marketing programs weren't teaching them. The book, Ethical AI in Marketing, she wrote it because that practical guide didn't exist. And when she audited that system targeting stressed parents, She didn't just accept that this was how AI works. She asked, what if the whole optimization objective is wrong? When what exists doesn't serve people, build what should exist instead. But building what should exist requires knowing who's responsible for building it, and Nicole has a clear answer about that.
It is our jobs, especially marketers. I'm going to put the onus on marketers as a marketer myself, because we are the front line between the organization and the customer. And we are the ones that are supposed to, number one, understand the customer, understand the user as an individual, as a human, understand what we need to do to connect with them authentically for a long-term relationship. Once you start to understand the customer and utilize their insights, their data, their life story to make them vulnerable to something that they don't need, they don't want, through manipulation versus providing a story to them on why this makes sense for them, I think that's when you're fundamentally doing a disservice to marketing, but also to the organization and its shareholders, because that's not going to be a long-term relationship.
There's your business case. Not just that exploitation is wrong, though it is, but that it destroys the only asset that compounds over time, trust. And the next generation isn't interested in playing along with the old equation.
Especially with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, which is starting to spend money. Those generations are so much more honed in on what is important to them, and trust is a major factor. Now it's at their fingertips. They fact check you in the moment. And if it's so hard to earn trust and so easy for it to be diminished,
which means the companies that figure out how to engineer for trust first won't just be more ethical, they'll own the relationship with the most valuable customer segments. So the question isn't whether you can afford to care about this, it's whether you can afford not to. So we understand the problem, why it happens, and who needs to own it. The question now is, what does action look like? Nicole's answer isn't a checklist, it's a mindset shift.
Having an ethical framework that the system has to operate by. Fine-tune so the system to say, if this, then this, et cetera, and put in those elements of ethical guardrails.
If this, then this. That's the shift. When you tell your AI to maximize conversion, you also tell it not by targeting someone searching for financial relief at 2 a.m., not by identifying the moment when cognitive bias makes someone more vulnerable. The guardrails aren't a review step. They're part of the optimization itself. But here's the harder question. Who's actually capable of making this shift? Because it requires standing up in a room full of people celebrating conversion rates and saying, we're optimizing for the wrong thing.
With this higher level of emotional intelligence, you're starting to see a lot more leaders going into roles where empathy is pivotal, where understanding that you should be brave and go against the norm, the baseline, and have counter arguments, talk about how things should improve.
That courage to say, this doesn't feel right in a room full of people celebrating efficiency, that's not a soft skill. So what's the first move?
It starts with these baby steps of challenging someone in a meeting, saying, this doesn't feel right, and making sure that your voice is consistently heard until other people start picking up and having sort of that same rhythm.
Your next planning meeting, someone presents AI targeting results. The dashboard shows 40% improvement in conversion. Everyone's celebrating. That's when you ask, who's converting? Are they making informed decisions or are they in crisis? But here's the reframe that makes it strategic, not obstructionist. Don't ask, is this ethical? Ask, what constraints would make this sustainable? Not should we target the segment, but what would we need to be true about how we target them for this to build long-term value? You're not stopping the campaign, you're de-risking it, because the conversion that destroys trust isn't a win. It's technical debt on your customer lifetime value.
This is how you change your mindset, and therefore this is how your playbook should change. So I felt that there was just a general gap in that strategy ethics gap.
One question in one meeting that changes what success looks like. And when enough people ask it, the whole equation changes. Growth is a physics problem. Responsibility is a human problem. And the only way to solve for both is to stop treating them as separate equations. Nicole Alexander is someone who looked at an AI system working perfectly and asked, perfectly at what? Thank you, Nicole, for sharing your story with us. I'm Alora Weaver, and this is Humans of AI.